Mudaliar and Menon's Clinical Obstetrics, 13th edition, chapter 17, normal puparium. Okay, so now let's learn about the normal puparium. So what is the definition of puparium? Puparium is nothing but the period during which the anatomical and physiological changes of pregnancy revert to the non-pregnant state. So from the pregnant state, okay, there is going to be regression to non-pregnant state. All the anatomical, all the anatomical as well as the physiological changes, both the anatomical and physiological changes of the pregnancy are all going to revert or regress into a non-pregnant state. And this period of regression, okay, from the pregnancy changes to a non-pregnant state is known as puparium. The puerperal period extends from the end of the third stage of labor, that is from expulsion of the placenta until 6 weeks postpartum. So the puerperal period, when does it start? It starts from the end of the third stage of labor, and it till the expulsion of the placenta till 6 weeks postpartum. So again, definition of puparium is very important. So puparium is nothing but the period during which the anatomical and physiological changes of pregnancy are going to be reverting into a non-pregnant state. So the puerperal period extends from the end of the third stage. This is a very, very important MCQ. So when does the puerperal period last for? It starts from the end of the third stage of labor, from expulsion, okay, from expulsion of the placenta until 6 weeks postpartum. Very, very important to remember. So the definition is very important, and the puerperal period extends from the third stage of labor, and then to the expulsion of the placenta to 6 weeks postpartum. So let's first talk about the anatomical changes in the uterus in the puparium. So what are all the anatomical changes seen in the uterus in the puparium stage? First, uterine size undergoes involution. So what do you mean by involution? Involution is nothing but a process of gradual reduction in the size of the uterus to reach a non-pregnant state. So from a very huge uterus like this, okay, there is going to be regression, okay, in the reduction of size. So reduction of size of the uterus is known as, this process of reduction of size of uterus is otherwise known as involution. Very, very important term to be known. So involution is nothing but the process of gradual reduction in the size of the uterus to reach a non-pregnant state. Immediately after delivery, the uterus, how will it be? It will be hard, with a fundus of 10 to 12 centimeter above the symphysis pubis. Normally, the uterus reduces in size by 1 centimeter daily. This is an important MCQ. So normally the uterus reduces in size by 1 centimeter per day, and by 10th or 12th day cannot be felt per abdomen. Immediately postpartum, the uterus weighs approximately 1000 grams. 4 to 6 weeks after delivery, it weighs around 100 grams. So what are the anatomical changes in uterus and puparium is all you need to remember is the term involution. And what is this involution? Involution is nothing but a process of gradual reduction of the size of the uterus to reach into a non-pregnant state. So how will, after pregnancy, or I mean usually after delivery, the uterus is going to be hard and the fundus will be around 10 to 12 centimeter just above the symphysis pubis. And the reduction rate of what is the reduction rate? The reduction rate of uterus is generally going to be around 1 centimeter per day. Immediate postpartum, the uterus weighs approximately how much? Remember, approximately 1 kg. Remember, this is a star question. 4 to 6 weeks after delivery, and it weighs around 100 grams. So just from 1 kg, it's going on to 100 grams after delivery. That is after 6 weeks after delivery. So immediate postpartum is going to be 1 kg, and after 6 weeks after delivery, it's going to be, this is 6 weeks, this is immediate postpartum. Immediate postpartum 1 kg, after 6 weeks it's going to be around 100 grams. Next, something called as sub-involution of the uterus. So what do you mean by sub-involution? What does this term means? Involution, we know, that is the gradual process in reduction of size from a large size to a small size, right? So what is sub-involution means? Sub-involution in the uterus means there is a delay in the process of involution. So sub-involution means there is nothing but there is a delay. There is delay in involution. A delay in involution process is known as sub-involution. So sub-involution means nothing but delay. There is some kind of delay in the process of involution, that we are calling it as sub-involution of the uterus. Now how do we diagnose sub-involution of uterus? This is diagnosed by the delay in the reduction of the uterine size. There is a delay in the reduction of the uterine size. Secondly is presence of prolonged lochial discharge and bleeding in the puerperal period. So by 3 things we can diagnose. One we already learned is that there is a delay in the reduction of the uterine size. Second, there is going to be a prolonged lochial discharge and bleeding in the puerperal period. So what are the 3 findings seen in subinvolution of the uterus? So findings in subinvolution, what are they? First, there is a delay in the reduction size of uterus. There is going to be delay in the reduction size of the uterus. Secondly, there is going to be a prolonged lochial discharge. Prolonged lochial discharge. And number 3 is bleeding in puerperal period. So these are the 3 findings in subinvolution of uterus: delay in the size of the uterus, prolonged lochial discharge, and bleeding in the puerperal period. So the causes of subinvolution of uterus are, there are certain causes, around 5 causes. First is going to be retained bits of placental tissue or membranes. There will be some kind of bits over here and there. There will be some retained bits of placental tissue or membranes. Then coming to endometritis and puerperal sepsis, distorted uterine anatomy, and presence of fibroids. So what are the causes of subinvolution of uterus? So there are some bits. What bits? Placental tissue or membranes, some bits. Second is endometritis. Then sepsis, puerperal sepsis, distorted uterine anatomy, and presence of fibroids. So bits, endometritis, puerperal sepsis, distorted uterine anatomy, and fibroids. So we can remember just with a mnemonic called as just remember like F beds. Okay, F beds. F for fibroids, B for bits of placental tissue or membranes, E for endometritis, D for a distorted uterine anatomy, and sepsis of puparium. So this is the mnemonic F beds. Now coming to uterine vessel changes. Soon after delivery, the uterine blood vessels are going to be obliterated by thrombosis and later it will degenerate. So hyaline changes obliterate the larger vessels. Okay, and new and smaller vessels develop in the surrounding area. Eventually, there is a blood clot. There is a blood clot in the lumen of the vessels, and this blood clot will get absorbed. The vessel walls are then represented by a solid or a thinly canalized mass of hyaline tissue. The placental site vessels also undergo thrombosis and hyalinization. So very simple things, only 2 things to be remembered under the heading uterine vessel changes. One is hyalinization and number 2 is thrombosis. Yes, that's all. Only these 2. So uterine vessel changes, just remember hyalinization and thrombosis. So let's move on to the endometrial changes. So endometrial changes, the superficial layer of the endometrium degenerates. What is the superficial layer of the endometrium? Decidua functionalis. So decidua functionalis will degenerate and is going to be shed as lochia. Whereas the deep basal layer remains from which the endometrium develops in the future. So the superficial layer of the endometrium degenerates and is going to be shed as lochia, whereas the deep basal layer remains from which the endometrium develops in the future. So let's learn what is lochia. Is a very important question. What is lochia? Lochia is nothing but discharge from the uterus which is seen in the puerperal period. What is the puerperal period? 6 weeks. Yes, 6 weeks is the puerperal period. So lochia is a discharge from the uterus which is seen in the puerperal period, that is around 6 weeks. Degenerating decidua, blood clots and bits of fetal membrane may be present in the uterus degeneration, which can cast off in the lochial discharge. Regeneration generally begins in the first week after labor and is complete in a month except over the placental site. Remember, so lochia is nothing but discharge, uterine discharge. Lochia is nothing but uterine discharge during the puerperium period. Okay, when is the puerperium period? 6 weeks. That's it. And a very important MCQ is decidua. The degenerating decidua here is going to be decidua basalis. So degenerating decidua, blood clots as well as bits of fetal membrane will be present in the lochial discharge. So regeneration also occurs only after first week after labor. Very important. Based on the color of the discharge, we can classify into 3. Lochia rubra, which is red in color, Lochia serosa, and Lochia alba, which is white in color. So Lochia rubra is seen in the first 3 days because there is some RBCs along with it. That's the reason why it's red in color. So Lochia rubra seen in first 3 days. Then you have Lochia serosa. After Lochia serosa, we have Lochia alba. The healthy Lochia has a sweetish, mawkish odor. and whereas an infected lochia is going to be offensive odor. Periphery of the diaper stains dark and center is going to be pale. So an infective lochia is offensive, the periphery is going to be dark, whereas in the center it's going to be just pale. So these are all the anatomical changes in the uterus in the puparium that we have seen so far. So just to do a quick revision, so we have learnt about the puparium definition, and then we started about the anatomical changes in the uterus in the puparium. We studied first what is involution, what is subinvolution of the uterus, then uterine vessel, just two changes, hyalinization, thrombosis, then endometrial changes, mainly talking about the lochia and what is lochia, what are the different kinds of lochia, and now we are going to move on to the changes in the cervix, vagina and the external genitalia. So during the puerperal period, the uterine changes were very most important. Now let's move on to the cervix, changes in the cervix. So the cervix gradually becomes thick and smaller. However, the size and appearance never returns to the normal, to the non-gravid state at all. This is a very important point to remember. The size and the appearance of the cervix never returns to the non-gravid state. So in a multigravida, the cervix appears wide. The external os also, as a transverse slit, and there are bilateral depressions on either side due to the lacerations. Whereas in a nullipara, the cervical os is going to be round. That's the only difference. So in multigravida, the cervix is going to be wide, whereas in a nullipara, the cervical os is going to be round. Cervical os is going to be round. That's the difference. Multiparous women who have only had elective cesareans in the past have a small cervix with a narrow external os. Now, next coming to the changes seen in vagina. Signs of laceration may be noted. The hymen, very important MCQ favorite question. The hymen completely disappears and the remnants of the hymens, all the remnants of the hymens are going to be form a structure known as carunculae myrtiformis. Very important. Carunculae myrtiformis. Carunculae myrtiformis, very important to remember. So vagina, just remember the signs of laceration and the remnants of hymen, that is carunculae myrtiformis. The vascularity of the vagina also decreases gradually and the vaginal rugosity also appears. Next coming to perineum. In perineum, the changes in perineum are the pelvic floor and the perineum are going to be stretched. This is the first point. So the pelvic floor and perineum are going to be stretched. The levator ani muscle tone is also going to be reduced due to pudendal neuropathy. So due to pudendal neuropathy, the levator ani muscle tone is also reduced. Perineal muscle tone can be improved by postnatal pelvic floor exercises also. So next, coming to the changes seen in abdominal wall and peritoneum. So what are the changes seen in abdominal wall and peritoneum? So as we know, the pelvic peritoneum and the structures of the broad ligament, reduce in size to accommodate the diminishing size of the pelvic organs. The striae gravidarum do not disappear as the elastic fibers of the skin have ruptured. The striae gravidarum do not disappear. Why they don't disappear? Because the elastic fibers of the skin have ruptured. Abdominal wall is going to be flat and flabby right now. Obviously, this is the puerperium period, and in puerperium period, it's going to be a non-gravid state. Because it is a non-gravid state, how will the abdomen be? It will be flat. It will be normal looking, flat and flabby. Occasionally, there is going to be divarication of recti muscle. So, that's not needed. Just remember, due to a non-gravid state, the abdominal wall is going to be flat and flabby. The pelvic peritoneum and structures of the broad ligament in size are going to be incised to accommodate all the diminishing size of the pelvic organs. So we finished anatomical changes of the uterus, the cervix, the vagina, and the pupa, the perineum, perineum, the abdominal wall. Everything is done. So now let's talk about the physiological changes in the puerperal period. So what all physiological changes will occur? First change is going to be the fluid balance and hormonal changes. So there will be both fluid balance and hormonal changes. So excretion of fluids is going to be around, due to excretion of fluids, how many weight loss is going to be there? 3 to 4 kg weight loss will be there. So there is going to be fluid excretion. Because of fluid excretion, there is going to be 3 to 4 kg weight loss. So due to fluid excretion, there is around 3 to 4 kg of weight loss. Then next, coming to hormonal changes. So the levels of HCG, estrogen, progesterone fall abruptly to normal non-pregnant levels within a week of delivery. In lactating women, the prolactin levels are going to be increased and the gonadotropin levels and estrogen levels are going to be low. In a non-lactating woman, the hormone levels normalize in around 2 to 3 weeks time. So this is all the so fluid imbalance will be there. The fluid excretion will be there. Due to fluid excretion, how much weight loss? 3 to 4 kg weight loss. And what are the hormonal changes? Definitely the HCG, the estrogen, all our heroes of OBG, progesterone, all of them will fall. Drastically, all of them will fall to normal non-pregnant levels within a week. Within 1 week, all of them are going to fall. So in lactating women, the prolactin levels are all going to be, but in case of a lactating women, the prolactin is going to be more. Prolactin levels will be increased and they will normalize within again 2 to 3 weeks of time. So next, coming to the cardiovascular changes during puerperium. The cardiac output remains high only for around 24 hours and revert to non-pregnant state levels in 2 weeks. Heart rate and blood pressure reach the non-pregnant values, that is 1 to 2 days after delivery, and the cardiac size also reduces. Next, coming to the urinary tract changes. The puerperal bladder has increased capacity and is going to be relatively insensitive. The dilatation and tortuosity of the ureters disappear within 4 to 6 weeks. Now there is pronounced diuresis on the 2nd or 3rd day of puerperium. So the increased, very important question in urinary tract changes. Just remember this point. It's very important. That is, the glomerular filtration rate, GFR, will be increased. That occurs during the pregnancy and remains normal within 6 to 8 weeks. So what are all the changes? There are going to be just 3 changes. One is bladder capacity will be increased. So bladder capacity will be increased. GFR will be increased. And ureters are going to be tortuous and dilated. So that's all. So urinary tract changes, GFR increases, bladder capacity increases, and ureters are going to be tortuous and dilated. Next, coming to the hematological changes. So the blood volume reduces by 20% by around 5th day and returns to normal in 4 to 6 weeks. Hematocrit rises by about 5%. There is going to be marked leukocytosis as well as thrombocytosis and reduces in 7 to 10 days. The raised ESR returns to normal in 4 weeks. The fibrinogen and other coagulation factors remain elevated during the puerperium, which may predispose for thrombotic manifestations. Now coming to the GI system changes, constipation is going to be corrected by maintaining high residual diet, increasing fluid intake, and early ambulation. So these are all, just remember one change in hematological is there is going to be marked leukocytosis. So marked leukocytosis and thrombocytosis. Next, coming to resumption of ovulation and menstruation. In a non-lactating women, menstruation resumes in greater than 40% cases by the 6th week and 80% will menstruate by the 3rd month. So in women who breastfeed, resumption of the menstruation and ovulation may occur as early as 8 to 10 weeks or as late as 18 months after delivery. Additional contraception is advised after 3 months. Weight loss in puerperium. There is going to be weight loss of around 6 to 7 kg due to delivery of the fetus, placenta, amniotic fluid, loss of water due to diuresis in the puerperal period. So the very important MCQ point that is to be noted here is how many kgs are lost in puerperal period. How many kgs are lost during puerperal period? Around 6 to 7 kgs are lost. And why? Because of delivery of fetus, not only fetus but placenta, amniotic fluid, and loss of water. All are the causes. Why? You are getting 6 to 7 kg of weight loss in puerperal period. So let's talk about, so we saw the anatomical changes, the physiological changes. Under physiological changes, what all we saw? We saw under the headings of excretion of fluids causing 3 to 4 kg of weight loss. Hormonal changes we saw. Cardiovascular changes, urinary tract changes, hematological changes, and total weight loss. So now let's talk about the normal events in the puerperium. So these is, remember, these are all normal events in the puerperium. So first one is going to be puerperal chill or postpartum chill. Second, after pain. Third, transient urinary and fecal incontinence. First one is puerperal chill and postpartum chill. Second one is after pain. Third one is transient urinary and fecal incontinence. So puerperal chill or postpartum chill. So nearly 25% of mothers may experience shivering. They experience shivering soon after the delivery, which may last up to 1 hour, and that is known as puerperal chill or postpartum chill. So this is done. Now next, coming to after pain. So what do you mean by after pain? So with suckling, okay, or in an effort to expel the collected blood from the uterus, in order to expel the collected blood from the uterus, what it does is it contracts intermittently like it does in labor, resulting in pain, and this disappears within 1 week. So what happens is, due to there some remnant collections of blood in the uterus starts contracting, and this leads to some kind of intermittent discomfort pain, and this is what we refer to as after pain. This is what is referred to as after pain. Now next, coming to transient urinary and fecal incontinence will definitely be there. So this is due to transient pudendal neuropathy. Remember this word, transient pudendal neuropathy. So the pudendal nerve So B, definitely there are going to be lacerations and tears in the perineum, due to which there is going to be pudendal nerve damage. That is referred to as transient pudendal neuropathy, and this causes transient urinary and fecal incompetence. Why? By the compression of pudendal nerve by the fetal head is one reason. The levator ani muscle damage resulting from the prolonged second stage is another reason, and delivery of a big baby. So what are the causes of transient pudendal neuropathy? First one is compression of pudendal nerve by fetal head. Second is levator ani muscle damage resulting from a prolonged second stage of labor. Then third is delivery of a big baby. Now, care of the mother during puerperium. How to give care to a mother during the puerperium period of 6 weeks. So, following a normal delivery, the woman is going to be kept in the hospital facility for a minimum of around 48 hours. This is important. So, after a normal delivery, the woman should be kept in hospital for how many hours? A minimum of at least 48 hours. The general condition of the patient, the temperature, pulse, lochia, involution of the uterus, the perineum, and the state of the bladder and bowel should be observed. The condition of the newborn should also be monitored. In women who have had a C-section, a wound side pain, infection, post-spinal headache, and bowel related problems such as paralytic ileus should be looked for. Now, so care of the mother during puerperium. First, early ambulation. So what is the meaning of ambulation? So basically early ambulation reduces the, why do we give early ambulation? It reduces the frequency of puerperal venous thrombosis, pulmonary embolism, urinary retention, catheterization, and constipation. So early ambulation, what does ambulation means? The patient will be asked to walk. So by walking, what happens means it can reduce frequency of any puerperal venous thrombosis, pulmonary embolism, urinary retention, catheterization, and constipation also. Then very important one is monitoring of after pains. So how do we monitor after pains? So usually it occurs in multipara and after precipitate labor or in a primipara with an overdistended uterus or retained clots can occur. So the best one is reassurance. You need to reassure the patient about the after pains and give analgesics which can help to alleviate the pain. So next is monitoring of temperature. So how do we monitor? How should we monitor temperature in a puerperal period? So 6th hourly, every 6th hourly, the temperature monitoring should be done. Every 6th hourly, the temperature monitoring should be done every 6th hourly. So sometimes the mother may get also chills, puerperal chills, postpartum chills with rigors, and temperature may shoot also to 101 to 102 degrees Celsius, which normalizes within 24 hours. Thereafter must be viewed with suspicion and all causes of infection should be ruled out. This is very, very important. All causes of infection must be ruled out. And then you need to give rest. So the delivered mother should be encouraged to get adequate rest and sleep as and when she finds time. Then how do you advise on diet? So advise on diet. So for a normal vaginal delivery, the woman may eat and drink 2 hours after delivery according to her desire. The diet of a lactating woman, in case of a lactating woman, should have plenty of proteins, meat, fish, fresh fruit and greeny vegetables. The total diet should have an additional of 400 to 700 kilocalories. This is important. So the additional calories, how many additional calories to be given? Around 400 to 700 kilocals. Iron supplementation should be continued for at least 3 months after delivery. So generally this is one mistake they do. They think after delivery iron supplementation is not required, but it is wrong. Iron supplementation must be given. Iron supplementation must be given 3 months duration, 3 months after the delivery. Adequate hydration is very important. Regular bladder and bowel movements are important. Early ambulation and early feeding can reduce the incidence of constipation. The genitalia should be cleaned and protected after every evacuation of the bowels. So this is all very important. Hygiene is the genital hygiene is very important, that you need to advise the mother about, because and early ambulation, early feeding, all can reduce incidence of constipation. Genital hygiene is important and all. So remember, calories around additionally 400 to 700 kilocalories additionally. Iron supplementation of course must be given for 3 months at least after delivery. Regulating bladder and bowel movements is required, and genital hygiene is also required. So next is very important, care of breast begin during the antenatal period itself. Okay, so retracted nipples are more easily managed than when recognized during lactation. Nipple fissures. In case of any nipple fissures, emollients are given after every feed. And in case of any irritated nipples, nipple shield for 24 hours can be advised. Next is care of the perineum. So of course the perineum, the genital hygiene only. So it should be kept clean and dry. Cleanse the vulva from anterior to posterior. Glycerin magnesium sulfate fermentation reduces edema and discomfort. Warm bath can also relieve pain. Complete perineal tear repair. Non-residual diet for 4 to 5 days. Laxatives laxatives should be given to to permit a soft motion. So care of perineum. Then breastfeeding. So breastfeeding, the women should feed the baby on demand. Rooming in is encouraged, very important. Advice on postnatal exercise. Normal vaginal delivery. Low impact activities such as walking, abdominal tightening and pelvic floor exercise in 1 to 2 weeks after delivery. Restore the tone of the abdominal and pelvic floor muscles. Sexual activity. Most couples resume sexual activity in 3 to 4 weeks. However, sexual activity may be affected by loss of libido and dyspareunia due to an episiotomy wound. So next, coming to immunization. Rh negative, very important. During the puerperium, immunization should be done. An Rh negative women with a Rh positive baby, 300 microgram of anti-D. 300 microgram of anti-D immunoglobulin. Okay, 300 microgram of anti-D immunoglobulin within 72 hours of delivery should be given. So very important. So if there is an Rh negative mother with an Rh positive baby, how much immunoglobulin should be given? 300 microgram of anti-D immunoglobulin within 72 hours. Within 72 hours must be given. Rubella vaccine and vaccine against cervical carcinoma can also be given in postpartum period. So puerperal complications, postpartum psychological changes, puerperal fever, breastfeeding difficulties, secondary postpartum hemorrhage, thromboembolic manifestations, problems related to skeletal and nervous systems, all. Now, care of the mother during puerperium. Recognizing postpartum depression is very much important. So care of the mother's mental health. Usually the mothers after delivery, the mood swings will be very depressive. So there's something known as postpartum blues. The postpartum depression is otherwise known as postpartum blues, tearfulness or crying for no reason, mood swings, irritability, anxiety, loss of appetite and sleep, and fatigue. Then postpartum depression is something to be addressed. Then pelvic arthropathy. What is pelvic arthropathy? So during pregnancy there is going to be softening and relaxation of the joints of the pelvis. Okay, so during okay, yeah. So where are we? Yeah, okay, so we are in pelvic arthropathy. During pregnancy there is softening and relaxation of the joints of the pelvis, and may pain over symphysis pubis and over both sacroiliac joints supporting. Okay, this is not very much required. Just remember, there's going to be during pregnancy there will be relaxation and softening of the joints of pelvis leading to pelvic arthropathy. Next is maternal palsies. So what are all the maternal palsies seen? Prolonged labor or instrumental delivery, unilateral paralysis of lower extremity can occur. There is numbness over the skin of the lower part of the leg, the ankle and the foot drop. Just remember foot drop. Treatment consists of keeping the foot dorsiflexed by a splint, gentle massage and passive and active movements. Timing discharge from hospital following an uncomplicated delivery. Discharged within 48 hours. C-section discharged after 4 to 5 days. Review in 2 weeks time. So this is all about the care that we will do about in during the puerperium period. So this is postnatal care. So though the 6th week postnatal visit is going to be traditional, it is recommended to have two visits at least during the postnatal care. Okay, the first one during 2 to 3 weeks, and second during 12 weeks. Contraception is needed early as 3 weeks. The postnatal care includes evaluation of general health and recovery from the effects of childbirth, breast inspection and etc. So breastfeeding and lactation, very just you we all as we it's just the revision. We are like most of you know physiology of lactation. So breast lobule alveolus will be opening to ductules like lactiferous ducts, and there is going to be estrogen stimulation, progesterone stimulations. So lactogenesis is nothing but milk production. Prolactin, just remember prolactin levels during milk production will be more, around greater than 200 nanogram per ml. There is also increase in free cortisol, hyperinsulinemia and increase hyperprolactinemia from the placenta that can influence both the breast development as well as milk production. So suckling sends afferent impulses to the hypothalamus, resulting in further release of prolactin, which also helps in the initiation of lactation. This is important. Letting down of milk, very important question. Letting down of milk. So what is this letting down of milk? So here you have the brain. So basically the suckling part, what it does is it stimulates, and due to the suckling will be a stimulation. There's nerve impulses are going to be passing to the brain from suckling, and after the impulses reach the brain from the anterior pituitary, this is the anterior pituitary, releases prolactin into the bloodstream. So now what is going to be carried in? This is the bloodstream. What is carried via the anterior pituitary? Prolactin is going to be carried via the bloodstream, and this prolactin will be acting upon the mammary glands, lobules, and further on milk secretion is going to be there descending the alveoli. This is known as letting down of milk. Ejection of milk or letting down of milk. So suckling is the major stimulation here that will carry the impulses right to the brain. From the brain, anterior pituitary, what will be released? Prolactin will be released into the bloodstream, and this prolactin will be acting over the mammary gland lobules to produce what? Milk ejection. This is letting down reflex. So what are the types of breast milk? This is very common. First is the colostrum, or the early milk is produced in the late stages of pregnancy until 4 days after delivery and is rich in antibodies. Transitional milk, which is produced from day 4 to 10 postpartum, has protein content is going to be lower than that of colostrum. Mature milk is going to be produced from approximately around 10 days after the delivery until the termination of breastfeeding. Composition of human milk. So composition of human milk. What is the composition of human milk? First, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are going to be around 7 to 8%. Lactose will be there. This lactose enhances the growth of lactobacillus in the GI tract also. Protein content is going to be low. Fat content is going to be around 3 to 5%. Adequate vitamins and minerals are going to be there. Water and electrolytes are going to be 88%. Immunogenic properties like immunoglobulin A, lymphocytes and interferon, and except vitamin K. All of this you'll be having. Okay, this is the composition of human milk with carbs, protein, fat, lactose, adequate vitamins and minerals, and 88% water and electrolytes. So what are the factors affecting milk secretion? So the factors affecting milk secretion are, first is the rate of secretion of mature milk. So when does the mature milk is going to be there? 10 days. So in the 10th days of lactation only, what is going to be produced? Your mature milk is going to be produced. This secretion rate of mature milk is going to be 850 ml per day. So how much it is? 850 ml per day. 850 ml per day. Energy loss is going to be 600 calories lost by the mother. So how much energy loss? 600 calories. 600 calories are going to be lost by the mother. 600 calories are going to be lost by the mother. So the secretion is going to be influenced by various factors like diet, hormones, mental conditions, age, parity, etc. Now, advantages of breastfeeding: provides nutrition, has significant emotional, psychological benefits of breastfeeding for the infant. Yeah, it's going to be the complete food for the neonate. Stimulates biological science for promoting cellular growth and differentiation. This is all, the general points. It gives immune system, cognitive development, so reduces all the risk of childhood obesity and diabetes. Benefits. Okay, these are all the benefits of breastfeeding in case of infant. Now, what are the benefits? This is important. What are the benefits of breastfeeding in case of a mother? So, benefits of breastfeeding for a mother. First, the breastfeeding strengthens the emotional bond between the mother and the neonate. This is the first point. It will strengthen the bond between the mother and the baby. Then reduces the blood loss after delivery and helps in involution. Again, what is involution? The uterine size is going to reduce. That is involution. So for the process of involution and to reduce blood loss after delivery, breastfeeding is a very beneficial factor. It aids in weight reduction. It reduces the risk of breast, ovarian and endometrial carcinoma. This is a star point. What are the cancers that are going to be prevented, that are going to be protected by breastfeeding? Breast cancer, breast CA, ovarian CA, and endometrial CA. The natural method of contraception is breastfeeding. This is also very, very important for. So the advantages of breastfeeding, first one you should know is it is a protective factor against breast carcinoma, ovarian carcinoma and endometrial carcinoma. The second factor is it is a natural method of contraception. That is another one to remember. And it helps in the process of involution, reduces the blood loss after delivery. Breastfeeding strengthens the emotional bond between the mother and neonate. So these are the advantages of the breastfeeding in mother. Coming to contraindications of breastfeeding. So when the mother is critically ill, breastfeeding is not suggested. Any kind of puerperal psychosis or active TB, herpes lesion on the mother's breast, infant with congenital error of metabolism, when the baby has cleft lip or cleft palate, when the mother is on anti-cancer therapy or radioactive isotopes, lactation suppression. How do you give lactation suppression? Any cold fermentations, tight breast binders, dopamine agonists such as bromocriptine and cabergoline. Very, very important. So what are the lactation suppression factors? So the factors that will suppress lactation are: point number 1, any kind of cold fermentations that you give, any kind of cold fermentations. Point number 2, any tight breast binders, tight breast binders. And third one, very important, dopamine agonist or bromocriptine and cabergoline. So these are the factors for lactation suppression: cold fermentation, tight breast binders, dopamine agonists such as bromocriptine and cabergoline. So optimal breastfeeding practice is: first, exclusive breastfeeding. Breastfeeding should be initiated within 1 hour of birth. Within 1 hour is very, very important. Breastfeeding should be started within 1 hour of birth. Continued breastfeeding for around 2 years of age or beyond, along with complementary feeds. So what is the feeding technique? Mother should be seated with the back well supported. Baby should be facing the mother, just like this image. The baby should be facing the mother with its head and neck and back in the same plane and supported by the mother's arm. Proper latching is important, very, very important. The proper latching must be done with the latch score. Yeah, just for revision, the latch score is nothing but L for latch, A for audible swallowing, T for type of nipple, C for comfort, and H for holding. So in latch, as you would have learnt in pediatrics, right? Latch 0 score 1 and 2. So in latch, if very too sleepy or reluctant, audible swallowing, you need to check. Type of nipple, whereas inverted, flat or everted, comfort. Now what is the average milk requirement? So in early days, the baby requires around 100 ml per kg body weight per 24 hours. So 100 ml per kg body weight per 24 hours is going to be your requirement, average milk requirement. So what is the average milk requirement for the baby? 100 ml per kg per 24 hours. By the 10th day, the requirement going to be increasing to 150. So by the 10th day, the requirement will be increasing to around 150 ml per kg per body weight that is per 24 hours for 24 hours. So breastfeeding problems. There are certain breastfeeding problems like insufficient milk production, breast engorgement, breast abscess, cracked nipples, mastitis, retracted or inverted nipples. So, how do we store breast milk? Breast milk can be expressed manually or by using a breast pump and stored at room temperature for 6 to 8 hours, in the refrigerator for 24 hours, or in the freezer for up to 3 months. After storing in the refrigerator or the freezer, the milk should not be boiled. The container is going to be placed in a warm water at around 40 degrees Celsius and gently shaken. So, how do you store breast milk? First, by using a breast pump. This breast pump is stored at room temperature for around how many hours? 6 to 8 hours. In the refrigerator for 24 hours. Okay, or a freezer you can store. After storing in the refrigerator or freezer, the milk should not be boiled. The container is going to be placed in warm water at 40 degrees Celsius and gently shaken. Yeah, so we have completely covered this chapter called normal puparium. So I'll just revise all the key points. So all the key points are going to be: first, puparium is the period after delivery. So puparium is the period after delivery during which the pregnancy change regress. Involution of uterus occurs. Lactation is going to be established. Breastfeeding has many advantages and should be encouraged unless it is contraindicated. Women should receive instructions regarding normal physiological changes of the puparium, including normal pattern of the lochia, after pains, milk letdown, and weight loss. Women with fever, extensive vaginal bleeding, leg pain, or chest discomfort, and persistent depression should receive prompt medical attention. So the very important questions from this chapter will be: what are the humoral mechanisms? Yeah. Yeah, so first the questions will be: what are the humoral mechanisms involved in lactations? What are the humoral mechanisms involved in lactation? And write short notes. Write short notes on uterine involution. What is uterine? What do you mean by uterine involution? And what is lochia is a very important short note. What is lochia? What are the humoral mechanisms involved in advantages? Next short notes will be, or what are all the advantages of both neonate and mother by breastfeeding? What are the advantages of breastfeeding? And very very important question, short note: define puparium. So definition: define puparium. So I hope this chapter series is helpful for you to just entirely go through the chapters. So if you find the answers for the questions that I've listed here, try to learn at least these questions. It will be helpful for your exams. And if you find the answers, please do type in the comment box. And like this channel and subscribe this channel for getting more lecture series from this.